The city never sleeps, but some nights it holds its breath. He'd walked that street 1,000 times in 3 centuries, feeling nothing but the weight of his crown and the emptiness where his heart used to beat. Until tonight. Until he saw her face on the streetlight, older, wearier, but unmistakably hers. And beside her, 3 small shadows with eyes that glowed like dying stars. Some truths don't wait for you to be ready. They hunt you down in the dark, wearing the faces you thought you'd never see again. The rain hadn't started yet, but Nikolai Thorne could taste it in the air, metallic, electric, like blood before it spilled. He stood at the edge of Meridian Street, watching the city exhale its neon glow into the October mist. 300 years of immortality had taught him to read the weather, to sense shifts in power, to know when something was about to break. He just never expected it to be him. His reflection stared back from the darkened window of a closed antique shop. Tall, angular, with the kind of beauty that looked carved rather than born. Silver-threaded black hair swept back from a face that hadn't aged since 1723. The Vampire King. The Eternal Throne. The man who destroyed his own kingdom to protect it. Liar. Whispered a voice in his head that sounded too much like hers. He turned away from his reflection and began walking the way he always did when memory became unbearable. His Italian leather shoes made no sound on the wet pavement. Around him, the mortal world rushed past. Couples arguing, taxis honking, a street musician playing a mournful violin. None of them saw him, not really. Vampires learned early how to move through human spaces like smoke through a keyhole. The treaty with the werewolf clans had been signed, the blood trade route secured. His counsel was satisfied, which meant Nikolai was permitted exactly 3 hours of solitude before returning to the underground palace, where politics waited like a patient predator. He'd take those 3 hours and walk until his thoughts went numb. But then he turned the corner onto Ashford Lane, and everything stopped. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, the kind ancient vampires sometimes experience when they fed on corrupted blood or gone too long without rest. But hallucinations didn't smell like jasmine and rain. They didn't move with that particular grace, that careful way of holding yourself when you've learned the world is more dangerous than it pretends to be. Elena, she was 50 feet away, her back to him, wearing a simple gray coat that had seen better years. Her hair, once long and wild as a summer storm, was pulled back in a practical bun. She looked thinner than he remembered, fragile in a way that made his extinct heart clench like a fist. But she wasn't alone. 3 children walked beside her. Boys, maybe 5 or 6 years old, identical down to the way they tilted their heads when they looked up at the streetlights. They wore matching navy jackets, jeans, small backpacks shaped like dinosaurs. One of them laughed at something Elena said, and the sound pierced Nikolai like a wooden stake. He knew that laugh. He'd heard it in his own throat 2 centuries ago, before the world taught him that kings don't laugh, they command. The boy who'd laughed suddenly stopped walking, turned, looked directly at Nikolai. And Nikolai saw his own eyes staring back at him, that specific shade of amber that had marked the Thorne bloodline for 1,000 years. Eyes that could see in absolute darkness. Eyes that reflected light, like a wolf's. Eyes that didn't belong in a human child. The other 2 boys turned as well, moving in perfect synchronization. They didn't speak, didn't point, didn't cry out. They simply observed. 3 pairs of ancient eyes and young faces, watching him with an intensity that made Nikolai's skin prickle with something he hadn't felt in centuries. Fear. "Mom," one of them said quietly, tugging on Elena's coat. "He's here." Elena froze. Her entire body went rigid, and Nikolai could hear her heartbeat spike. Once, twice, 3 times, before she slowly, deliberately turned around. The years had touched her. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. A hardness in her jaw. But when their eyes met across the rain-slick street, it was like the 8 years since he banished her collapsed into nothing. Into that last moment in the throne room, when she stood before him in chains, pregnant and pleading, and he called her a liar and a whore. "You cannot give me children," he'd said, voice cold as winter stone. "This abomination you carry is proof of your betrayal. I cast you out, Elena Volkov. You are no longer queen. You are nothing." He believed it then. The council had presented evidence, letters, testimonies, a human man who claimed to be her lover. Nikolai had been so certain, so righteous in his fury, so convinced that his wife, his mortal wife, had finally done what everyone predicted, chosen her own kind over his. He'd been wrong before, of course. Kings were allowed mistakes in politics, in strategy, in mercy, but not in this, not in her. Elena's face showed no emotion now. She simply looked at him the way you might look at a dangerous animal you'd once kept as a pet. With recognition, yes, but also with the bone-deep knowledge that it could tear out your throat if you showed weakness. "Boys," she said softly, never breaking eye contact with Nikolai. "Get behind me." They obeyed instantly, moving with a fluidity that was definitely not human. The smallest one, were they triplets? How was that even possible? Gripped his mother's coat with pale, delicate fingers. Nikolai could see the faint tracery of veins beneath translucent skin. Damper. The word rose in his mind like a ghost. Half vampire, half human. Born of a union that should have been impossible. Born of a bloodline that was supposed to be sterile, with mortal partners. Born of him. "Elena," he said, and his voice came out raw, stripped of every bit of royal authority he'd spent centuries cultivating. Just her name, just the sound that had haunted him through 8 years of sleepless days and blood-soaked nights. She flinched. "Don't. I need to. You need to leave." Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled as she reached back to touch the nearest boy's head. "We have nothing to say to each other. Those children are mine." The word came out like a blade. "You made your choice 8 years ago, Your Majesty. You don't get to make another one now." The title felt like acid on his skin. She used to call him Nico, used to whisper it against his throat in the hours before dawn, when they'd lie tangled together in his chambers, pretending the world outside didn't exist, pretending their love could survive the weight of a crown and the hatred of a court that believed humans were food, not family. When the boys stepped forward, and Nikolai's breath caught. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The same sharp cheekbones, the same proud line of the nose, the same way of standing with shoulders back and chin lifted, like he was already learning to bear the weight of something heavy. "Are you the king?" the boy asked. His voice was clear, curious, untouched by fear. "Damien, don't." Elena reached for him, but the boy, Damien, dodged her hand with supernatural speed. "She told us about you," Damien continued, tilting his head in that unsettling way. "She said you were powerful and cruel, and that we should never, ever go looking for you." Each word was a knife. Nikolai felt them sink in, one by one, finding the spaces between his ribs where something like a conscience still lived. "She was right," Nikolai said quietly. "On all counts." Damien considered this. "Then why are you here?" "I didn't know." Nikolai stopped. Started again. "I didn't know you existed." "Liar." The word came from the smallest triplet, still half hidden behind Elena's coat. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. When he peeked out, Nikolai saw tears glistening on his pale cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but something else. Something that looked like fury. "Adrian, please," Elena murmured, kneeling down to pull the boy into her arms. "Not here." "He knew," Adrian insisted, his small hands fisting in his mother's coat. "He knew and he didn't care. He didn't want us. He didn't want you." The third boy, silent until now, moved to stand beside his brothers. He was the tallest of the three, with Elena's delicate features softened by Nikolai's immortal blood. His eyes held an old soul's exhaustion. "We should go, Mom," he said quietly, "before someone sees." Elena nodded, rising to her feet with Adrian still clinging to her. She looked at Nikolai one last time, and in that look, he saw everything they'd lost, everything he'd thrown away, everything he condemned to death with his pride. "If you have any honor left," she said, "you'll forget you saw us." Then she turned and walked away, herding the boys ahead of her with gentle hands and urgent whispers. Nikolai stood frozen, watching them disappear into the misty October night, watching his sons, how in God's name did his sons, vanish like ghosts he'd never believed in. It wasn't until they were completely gone that he realized his hands were shaking, and that somewhere in the city, a church bell was tolling midnight, calling him back to a throne that suddenly felt like a tomb. Nikolai didn't return to the palace that night. Instead, he stood on the roof of the Blackthorn Tower, the highest point in the city, where vampires came to remember what it felt like to be closer to stars and the graves. The wind tore at his coat, carrying the scent of approaching rain and distant fires. Below him, the city sprawled like a living creature, all light and shadow and secrets tucked into dark corners. Somewhere down there, Elena was putting 3 impossible children to bed. His children. The word felt foreign in his mind, like a language he'd never learned to speak. In 3 centuries of existence, Nikolai had never sired a child. It was one of the prices of vampirism. Immortality in exchange for legacy. The bloodline ended with transformation. It was written in every text, confirmed by every elder, accepted as a mutable law. Except it wasn't. You look like you've seen a ghost, Your Majesty. Nikolai didn't turn. He knew that voice. Smooth as aged whiskey, dangerous as a blade hidden in silk. Lucian Graves, his second-in-command, his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor. The vampire who'd stood beside Nikolai through revolutions and plagues and the endless, grinding machinery of court politics. The vampire who'd brought in the evidence of Elena's betrayal 8 years ago. I saw something worse, Nikolai said quietly. I saw the truth. Lucian moved to stand beside him, his pale hands clasped behind his back. He was shorter than Nikolai, but no less commanding. A predator in a bespoke suit, with dark eyes that missed nothing and a smile that never quite reached them. The truth is overrated, Lucian said. I prefer useful fictions. Did you know? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Lucian was silent for a long moment, watching the city breathe below. Did I know what precisely? That she was pregnant. That the children were mine. That everything you told me was a lie. Lucian's expression didn't change. I told you what the council needed you to believe. Nikolai's hand shot out, gripping Lucian's throat with enough force to crack stone. He slammed his oldest friend against the rooftop railing, fangs extending, fury blazing through every nerve. Lucian didn't fight back. He simply looked at Nikolai with something that might have been pity. Kill me if it helps, Lucian said calmly, even with Nikolai's fingers crushing his windpipe. But it won't change what happened. It won't bring her back. Why? The word came out broken, raw. Why would you do this? Because she made you weak. Lucian's voice was steady, matter of fact. Because a king who loves a human is a king who could be controlled. Because the council was fracturing, and they needed proof that even you weren't above the laws that govern us. Nikolai released him, stumbling back. His hands were shaking again, a tremor that spread through his entire body like poison. You destroyed my family to preserve your political power. I preserved your kingdom, Lucian corrected, straightening his collar. Your family was already doomed the moment you married her. A human queen? Please. The council tolerated it because they assumed she'd age and die within decades. When she became pregnant, he shrugged. They panicked. I simply gave them what they needed to act. The letters, the testimony, the man who claimed to be her lover, all fabricated. Beautifully, I might add. Nikolai wanted to kill him. Every instinct screamed for it. To tear out Lucian's throat, to paint the rooftop with his blood, to destroy the architect of his greatest mistake. But beneath the fury, a colder voice whispered, and then what? Will it undo the years? Will it bring Elena back? Will it make your sons know your name? Where is she? Nikolai asked instead. Where have they been hiding? Lucian raised an eyebrow. You think I've been keeping tabs on your discarded queen? I had her escorted to the border with enough money to start over. What she did after that is none of my concern. She has 3 damper children. Rare, powerful, worth a fortune on the black market. You expect me to believe no one's been hunting them? Something flickered in Lucian's eyes. If someone were hunting them, Your Majesty, I imagine they'd be dead by now. The implications settled like ice in Nikolai's stomach. Who? I don't deal in rumors. Lucian, The vampire sighed, turning to lean against the railing. There are whispers, nothing concrete, but certain collectors have been asking questions about half-breed children, specifically children of royal blood. The Red Court. Lucian nodded. The Red Court, a faction of ancient vampires who believe in the old ways, in absolute purity of bloodline, in extermination of anything that diluted their precious heritage. Dampiers were an abomination to them. Royal dampiers were an insult. They wouldn't dare, Nikolai said, but his voice lacked conviction. They would if they thought you didn't care. If they believed the children were bastards, mistakes, accidents of a foolish king who'd already disowned them. Lucian met his gaze. You made it very clear 8 years ago that Elena and whatever she carried meant nothing to you. Why would the Red Court fear your wrath over their deaths? Because he'd been too proud, too stupid, too blinded by wounded ego to see the trap closing around him. Because he'd chosen his throne over his heart. And now 3 innocent children were paying the price. I need to find them, Nikolai said, before the Red Court does. And then what? Reclaim them? Bring them to the palace? Present 3 half-human bastards to a council that already doubts your strength. Lucian shook his head. You can't protect them in the open, Nikolai. You can barely protect yourself. I'm the king. You're a king who just discovered he has 3 vulnerabilities walking around with his eyes and his blood. You're a king whose greatest enemy now knows exactly how to destroy you. Lucian's voice softened. I'm trying to help you see clearly. The smart move is to let them go. Let Elena keep them hidden. Let them live whatever life they can, far from this world. They're my sons. They're weapons, and everyone with power in this city will want to use them. Against you, against each other, against whatever future you're trying to build. Lucian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I know you, Nikolai. You're thinking you can fix this. You're thinking you can make it right. But some things once broken stay broken. Nikolai turned away, staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably awake, probably terrified, probably planning to run again. And his sons, Damien, Adrian, the third one whose name he didn't even know, were sleeping in whatever small apartment or shelter she'd managed to secure, dreaming whatever dreams damper children dream. They didn't know him. They didn't need him. They were better off without him. But that didn't stop the ache in his chest that felt too much like grief. Find them, he said quietly. Use whatever resources you need. But find them and make sure they're protected. I don't care what it costs. Nikolai, that's an order, Lucian, not a request. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lucian bowed, a shallow, mocking gesture that somehow still carried respect. As you wish, your majesty, though I suspect you'll regret this. I already do, Nikolai said, but at least this time, it'll be for the right reasons. 2 floors below, in a small apartment with bars on the windows and salt lines across the threshold, Elena Volkov sat at a kitchen table that wobbled on uneven legs. The boys were asleep in the single bedroom, curled together like puppies, their breathing synchronized in a way that reminded her they were more than human. Her hands shook as she poured herself tea she wouldn't drink. He'd found them. After 8 years of running, of hiding, of working 3 jobs under fake names in cities that never asked questions. After all that, Nikolai had found them with one accidental glance on one random street. And now they had to run again. Mom! She looked up to find Damien standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Even half asleep, he moved with that preternatural grace, that silent way of existing that marked him as other. Can't sleep, baby? I heard you crying. Elena touched her face, surprised to find tears on her cheeks. I'm okay. Go back to bed. Is he coming for us? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Elena wanted to lie, wanted to promise safety, wanted to be the kind of mother who could protect her children from the monsters that wore crowns. But she learned long ago that lies were temporary, and truth was the only armor that lasted. I don't know, she admitted, but we'll be ready if he does. Damien nodded slowly, then climbed into her lap, too big for it, really, but still small enough to fit in the circle of her arms. He pressed his face against her shoulder, and Elena felt the dampness of his tears soaking through her shirt. "Do you think he wants us?" Damien whispered. Elena closed her eyes, remembering the look on Nikolai's face when he'd seen the boys. Shock, yes. Confusion, definitely. But underneath it all, something else. Something that looked like pain. "I think," she said carefully, "that wanting and being able to have are two different things." "That's not an answer." "I know, baby. I know." They sat there in the weak kitchen light, mother and son, holding each other against the dark. And outside, the city exhaled its secrets into the October wind, carrying them up to the rooftops where kings stood and down to the shadows where hunters waited. The storm was coming. They all felt it in their bones. The safe house was in the industrial district, tucked between a defunct factory and a warehouse that smelled like rust and old blood. Nikolai arrived at dawn, when the world was still gray and uncertain, caught between night and day like a held breath. Lucian was already there, leaning against a black car with his arms crossed. He looked tired, or as tired as an immortal could look, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night spent calling in favors and making threats. "Well," Nikolai demanded. "She's smart," Lucian said, pushing off the car. "I'll give her that. Fake names, cash jobs, no digital footprint. She's been moving every 6 months, never staying long enough to establish roots. If you hadn't run into her last night, we might never have found her. But you found her now. I found where she was." Lucian held up a hand before Nikolai could explode. "The apartment is empty. They left 2 hours ago, before sunrise. My contact says she bought bus tickets to 3 different cities under 3 different names." Nikolai's jaw clenched. "She's running. Can you blame her? You spent 8 years convincing her you want her dead. Now you suddenly show interest in the children, and she's supposed to trust that?" Lucian shook his head. "She's protecting them the only way she knows how. By running straight into the arms of whoever's hunting them. They've survived 8 years without you. I think she's earned some credit." Nikolai wanted to argue, but Lucian was right. Elena had done the impossible. Kept 3 Damper children alive and hidden in a world that wanted to either kill them or sell them. She'd done it alone, without resources, without protection, without anything except her own fierce will. She'd done what he should have done. "The Red Court," Nikolai said, changing tactics. "What do we know?" Lucian's expression darkened. "More than I'd like. They've been active for the past 6 months, quietly acquiring half-breeds. Not killing them outright. That would draw too much attention. Instead, they're collecting them. For what purpose? That's the part that concerns me." Lucian pulled out a tablet. Swiping through images, 3 Dampiers disappeared from London, 2 from Prague, 1 from Sao Paulo, all children under 10, all offspring of minor vampire nobility. The pattern suggests they're looking for something specific, royal blood. Precisely. And now they know, or soon will know, that the vampire king himself has 3 sons walking around unprotected. Lucian met Nikolai's gaze. They won't pass up that opportunity. Nikolai's mind raced. The Red Court was old, powerful, and patient. If they wanted his sons, they'd get them eventually, unless he moved first. "We need leverage," he said. "Something they want more than my children. Such as me." Lucian laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You want to bargain yourself to the Red Court? That's suicide. Not myself. My cooperation." Nikolai began pacing, the way he did when strategy started forming. "The Red Court wants legitimacy. They want recognition, a seat at the table, influence over the throne. What if I offered them that in exchange for a blood oath to leave my family untouched? They'll demand more than a seat at the table. Then I'll give them more." "Nikolai, what would you have me do, Lucian?" Nikolai spun to face him, fury and desperation warring in his voice. "Let them hunt my sons like animals? Let Elena spend the rest of her life running? I made this mess. I'll unmake it. By selling pieces of your kingdom? By protecting what actually matters." The words hung between them, sharp and true. Lucian stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. You've changed, he said quietly. The man I knew would have chosen the throne over everything. The man you knew was a fool. Perhaps. Lucian tucked the tablet away. Or perhaps he was just alone for so long, he forgot what it felt like to have something to lose. Before Nikolai could respond, his phone rang, a sharp, unexpected sound in the gray morning. He pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number. Yes. You're looking for me. Elena's voice, cold, controlled, but underneath it, Nikolai could hear the tremor of fear. Elena, don't. Just listen. She took a breath. I know you found the apartment. I know you have people looking for us. I need you to call them off. I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to ease your conscience. There's a difference. Her voice hardened. We don't need your protection, Nikolai. We need you to leave us alone. The Red Court is hunting you. Silence. Then, how do you know that? Because they've been hunting every damper child they can find. Because you have royal blood, which makes you targets. Because he stopped, swallowed. Because they're not going to stop Elena, not unless I make them. And how exactly do you plan to do that? By giving them what they want, which is everything except you. More silence. Nikolai could hear muffled voices in the background. The boys, probably asking questions, probably scared. His chest ached with a need to be there, to see them, to explain everything he'd done wrong. There's a church, Elena said finally. St. Michael's on the east side. Meet me there at noon. Alone. Elena. Alone, Nikolai. Or I disappear, and you never find us again. Your choice. The line went dead. Nikolai stared at the phone, then at Lucian, who'd heard every word with vampire-enhanced hearing. It's a trap, Lucian said flatly. Probably. She could be working with the Red Court, could be planning to trade you for their safety. She won't. You can't know that. You haven't seen her in 8 years. People change. I know, Nikolai said quietly, but some things don't. And Elena would die before she betrayed someone she loved. She doesn't love you anymore. No, Nikolai agreed, pocketing his phone. But she loved me once. And that means she understands honor. Lucian shook his head, but didn't argue further. If you're going, take precautions. Protective wards, backup nearby, exit strategies. I'll go alone. That's suicide. That's trust. Nikolai started toward his own car, then paused. If I don't come back, Lucian, the kingdom is yours. But promise me something. What? Find them. Protect them. Give them the life I couldn't. Lucian's expression softened. Just for a moment. Just enough to show the friend beneath the advisor. Come back yourself, and you won't need me to. Nikolai nodded, then climbed into the car and drove away, leaving Lucian standing in the gray dawn like a shadow that didn't know whether to follow or let go. St. Michael's Church was old, genuinely old, built in a time when people believed architecture could touch heaven. It stood alone on a hill overlooking the city, its stone walls weathered by centuries, its stained glass windows depicting battles between angels and demons that suddenly felt too real. Nikolai arrived 15 minutes early, parking at the base of the hill and walking up the worn path. The morning sun was weak, filtered through clouds that threatened rain. He could feel it on his skin, that uncomfortable warmth that reminded him he was a creature of night, not day. But he walked anyway, up the path, through the iron gates, into the church courtyard where weeds grew between cobblestones. Elena was waiting on the steps. She looked smaller than he remembered, wrapped in a coat too big for a frame, her hair loose now and blowing in the wind. She didn't smile when she saw him, didn't flinch, just watched him approach with eyes that had seen too much. You came, she said. You called. I thought you'd bring an army. I thought about it. Nikolai stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance. Where are the boys? Safe. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Elena descended the steps slowly, and Nikolai noticed she was limping, a slight hitch in her left leg. An injury? Or just the accumulation of 8 years spent running? You're hurt, he said before he could stop himself. I'm alive. That's more than I expected. The words were a slap. Deserved, yes, but still painful. Nikolai forced himself to meet her gaze. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to understand. I didn't know. About the children, about the lie, about any of it. If I had known. You would have what? Elena's voice was sharp now. Cutting. Kept us? Loved us? Protected us? Don't rewrite history to make yourself feel better. Nikolai, you chose your throne. You chose your council. You chose everything except me. I was wrong. Yes, you were. She crossed her arms, and Nikolai saw scars on her wrists. Thin, white lines that looked like shackles. But being wrong doesn't erase 8 years. It doesn't erase what I went through to keep them alive. It doesn't erase the nights they cried asking why their father didn't want them. Each word was a blade, expertly placed. Nikolai felt them all land, felt them cut, felt them bleed. Tell me how to fix this, he said quietly. Tell me what you need, and I'll give it to you. I need you to let us go. I can't do that. Why not? Because the Red Court is coming, and when they do, you won't survive alone. Elena's expression flickered, just for a second, but enough. She knew. She'd known, probably for months, that something was hunting them. How bad is it, she asked. Nikolai told her everything. The disappearances, the pattern, the fact that her sons were the ultimate prize, royal Dampiers, living proof that vampire bloodlines could continue, could adapt, could evolve. He told her about the collectors, the hunters, the ancient vampires who saw her children as either threats or trophies. And he told her about his plan. You want to make a deal with the Red Court? Elena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You want to give them power in exchange for our safety? I want to give them everything except you. That's insane. That's love. The word fell between them like a stone in still water, creating ripples that spread and spread. Elena shook her head, stepping back. You don't get to say that. Not after everything. I know, but it's still true. Nikolai moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. I loved you 8 years ago, and I love you now. I loved you when I was too stupid and proud to see the trap. And I'll love you when I'm standing before the Red Court, bargaining away pieces of my soul to keep you safe. Stop. I can't, because if I stop, if I walk away, if I let you disappear again, they'll find you, Elena, and when they do, they'll take the boys. And I'll have lost everything that matters, not because I was wrong, but because I was too afraid to fight for it. Tears were streaming down Elena's face now, silent and unstoppable. I hate you, she whispered. I know. I hate that you're making me hope again. I know. I hate that I still... She stopped, turning away. This is a mistake. Probably. Nikolai reached out, then stopped himself. But I'd rather make a mistake trying to protect you than spend another 8 years living with the cost of doing nothing. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled something from her pocket, a photograph, creased and worn from being carried. She handed it to Nikolai without looking at him. It showed 3 boys on a beach somewhere, laughing, their feet in the surf. They looked wild and free and impossibly young. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was Elena, smiling in a way Nikolai hadn't seen in years. Their names are Damien, Adrian, and Marcus, she said softly. Damien is brave and reckless. Adrian is gentle and cries easily. Marcus is quiet and watches everything. They love dinosaurs and stargazing and stories about nights. They're afraid of thunder, but not of the dark. And they deserve better than this. Better than running, better than hiding, better than a father who only showed up when it was almost too late. Nikolai stared at the photograph, memorizing every detail. Then let me give them better. How? By ending this. By facing the Red Court and making sure they never have to run again. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I can't undo the past, Elena, but I can damn well try to fix the future. For a long, trembling moment, Elena just looked at him. Then she nodded, once sharp, final. All right, she said. But if you fail, if you die, if you make things worse, I'll take the boys and run so far, you'll never find us. Not in this life or any other. Deal! They shook hands, and Nikolai felt the warmth of her skin, the strength in her grip, the weight of everything they'd lost and might never get back. But beneath it all, he felt something else. Something small and fragile and dangerous. Hope. The meeting with the Red Court was set for midnight, in a place between worlds, an old cathedral that had been deconsecrated a century ago, left to rot on the edge of the city like a forgotten prayer. Nikolai arrived with Lucian at his side, and a dozen carefully chosen guards stationed in the shadows. Inside, the cathedral was magnificent and terrible. Moonlight streamed through broken stained glass, painting the floor in shattered rainbows. Candles lined the walls, hundreds of them, their flames steady and unnatural. And at the altar, waiting with the patience of stone, stood the Council of the Red Court. 7 vampires, each older than Nikolai, each powerful enough to level a city block if they chose. They wore formal attire that belonged to different centuries. Victorian suits, Renaissance gowns, medieval armor adapted for modern sensibilities. They looked like what they were, ancient predators playing at civilization. Lady Morgana stood at the center. She was beautiful in the way poison flowers are beautiful, all pale skin and dark eyes and a smile that promised death. She'd ruled the Red Court for 400 years, and she looked no older than 30. Nikolai Thorne, she purred as he approached, the vampire king himself. We're honored. Let's skip the pleasantries, Morgana. I know why you're hunting my children. Her smile widened. Direct. I appreciate that. Yes, we've been made aware of your unexpected offspring. 3 damper boys with royal blood. Quite the miracle, considering it should be impossible. It's none of your concern. Oh, but it is. You see, Dampiers represent a threat to our entire species. If vampires can breed with humans, if our bloodlines can be diluted and mixed, what does that say about our purity, our superiority? She circled him slowly, a shark testing the waters. What does it say about our future? It says we can evolve. It says we can be replaced. Morgana's voice hardened. Your children are proof that vampires are no longer the apex, that humanity can climb to our level, can merge with us, can eventually consume us. We cannot allow that. So you want to kill 3 innocent children. We want to eliminate a threat before it spreads. Nikolai felt rage building in his chest. Hot, primal, dangerous. But he forced it down, forced himself to think like a king instead of father. What if I offered you something better? He said carefully. Something more valuable than the blood of 3 children? Morgana tilted her head. I'm listening. The throne. Full recognition of the Red Court as a legitimate governing body. Seats on my council. Influence over vampire law. He spread his hands. Everything you wanted for centuries. In exchange for? A blood oath. You and every member of the Red Court swear never to harm my family. My ex-wife, my children, their children, down through every generation. You leave them untouched, and I'll give you the power you've been denied. Silence fell over the cathedral. The Red Court members exchanged glances, whispered in languages older than English. Morgana studied Nikolai with those ancient eyes, reading him the way predators read prey. You'd share your throne to save 3 half-breeds. I'd burn my throne to ash if it meant they lived. Even though they're not fully vampire? Because they're not fully vampire. Because they're proof that we can be more than monsters. Nikolai's voice rang through the cathedral. You call them threats. I call them hope. Hope that we don't have to feed on humans like cattle. Hope that we can build something better than endless night and endless hunger. Hope that my sons can grow up in a world where they're not hunted for what they are. Pretty words, Morgana said, but hope doesn't win wars. Power does. Then take my power. Take the throne, take the crown, take everything except them. You misunderstand. Morgana stepped closer, and Nikolai could see the hunger in her eyes. Not for blood, but for something deeper. We don't want your throne, Nikolai. We want your legacy. We want to prove that vampire purity matters, that mixing with humans weakens us, that your children, she smiled, are abominations that should never have been born. Nikolai's hand moved the blade at his hip. Then we have nothing more to discuss. On the contrary, We have everything to discuss." Morgana gestured, and the cathedral doors slammed shut. "You see, we already have one of your sons." The world stopped. "What?" "Adrian, I believe his name is. The gentle one. The one who cries easily." Morgana's smile was venom. "We took him 3 hours ago, while you were making your dramatic declarations of love to his mother. He's safe for now. Frightened, certainly. Confused, but alive." Rage exploded through Nikolai, pure, incandescent, murderous. He lunged at Morgana, fangs extending, claws erupting from his fingers. But before he could reach her, the other Red Court members moved, and suddenly he was on the ground, held down by forces he couldn't fight. "Where is he?" Nikolai snarled. "What have you done?" "Nothing permanent." "Yet." Morgana crouched beside him, her face inches from his. "Here's what's going to happen, Nikolai. You're going to go on television, on every news channel that exists, and you're going to denounce your children. You're going to call them mistakes, abominations, threats to vampire society. You're going to publicly execute any damper we bring to you. And you're going to enforce new laws that make vampire human breeding punishable by death. I'll never. You will, because if you don't, we'll kill Adrian. Slowly, painfully, while broadcasting it to your ex-wife and his brothers." She stroked his face with one cold finger. "And then we'll hunt down the other 2 and do the same. And Elena, we'll save her for last. We'll make her watch everything before we drain her dry. I'll destroy you," Nikolai whispered. "I'll tear apart every member of the Red Court. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. You'll do exactly what we say. Because you're not a king anymore, Nikolai. You're a father, and fathers always break." She stood, brushing off her gown. "You have until dawn to make your first broadcast. Fail and the boy dies. Refuse and the boy dies. Try to rescue him and the boy dies. Your only option is obedience. There's always another option." The voice came from the cathedral entrance. Nikolai twisted his head to see Elena standing in the doorway, flanked by Damien and Marcus. She held a silver stake in each hand, and her eyes burned with fury. "You made a mistake, Morgana," Elena said, walking forward with deadly calm. "You took my son. You threatened my family. And you forgot something very important." "And what's that?" "I was married to a vampire king for 3 years. You think I don't know how you operate? You think I don't know your weaknesses?" Elena raised the stakes. "I blessed these with holy water, prayed over them in 5 different languages, and carved sigils older than your precious Red Court. They won't just kill you, Morgana. They'll unmake you." Morgana laughed. "A human with kitchen knives? This is your rescue." "Not just me." The cathedral exploded with motion. From the shadows poured vampires, dozens of them, loyal to Nikolai, called by Lucian, armed and ready. Werewolves materialized from doorways, their alliance with the throne holding strong. And in the rafters above, something else stirred, something with wings and fire and ancient purpose. Angels. Nikolai felt the pressure release as the Red Court vampires scattered to defend themselves. He rose to his feet, fangs bared, rage giving him strength. "Where's Adrian?" he roared. "Beneath the altar," Morgana said, backing away. "In the crypt, but you'll never reach him in time." Nikolai didn't answer. He simply moved, faster than thought, faster than fear, down to the cathedral floor into the darkness below. Behind him, battle erupted, screams and metal and the wet sounds of violence. But he focused only on one thing, his son. The crypt was cold, dark, lined with coffins and bones. And in the center, chained to a stone pillar, was Adrian. The boy looked up as Nikolai approached, his amber eyes wide with terror. "Are you real?" "I'm real," Nikolai said, his hands shaking as he broke the chains like paper. "I'm here. I'm so sorry, Adrian. I'm so sorry." Adrian collapsed into his arms, and Nikolai held him, this small, fragile, impossible child who carried his blood and his mistakes and his one chance at redemption. He felt the boy's heartbeat against his chest, rapid and alive. "I want my mom," Adrian whispered. "I'll take you to her. I promise." They emerged from the crypt to find the battle ending. Morgana was cornered, surrounded by Elena and the boys. Stakes raised. The rest of the Red Court was either fled or subdued. And in the center of the cathedral, standing in a beam of moonlight, was Lucian, holding a document sealed in blood. A blood oath, Lucian announced, his voice carrying through the cathedral. Signed by every member of your forces, Morgana. They've sworn loyalty to the true throne in exchange for mercy. You have no army, no power, no future. You betrayed your own kind, Morgana spat. No, Lucian corrected. I serve my king. There's a difference. Morgana turned to Nikolai, hate burning in her eyes. This isn't over. Yes, Nikolai said quietly, Adrian still in his arms. It is. You're stripped of title, territory, and name. You're banished from this city and every territory that recognizes my authority. And if you ever come near my family again, he smiled, and it was a terrible thing. I won't need stakes or prayers or angels. I'll do it myself. Morgana fled, disappearing into shadows like smoke. The cathedral fell silent. Elena rushed to Nikolai, taking Adrian from his arms, checking him over with trembling hands. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you? I'm okay, Mom. I'm okay. Damien and Marcus crowded close. All three boys clinging to their mother while she held them and wept. Nikolai stood apart, watching them. This family he'd nearly lost, this miracle he didn't deserve. Thank you, Elena said finally, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. For saving him. For all of this. I should have done it 8 years ago. Yes, you should have. She stood, wiping her tears. But you're here now. That has to count for something. Does it? Elena considered him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. I don't know if I can forgive you, Nikolai. I don't know if they can. We have years of hurt and years of distance, and none of that disappears because you made one good choice. I know. But, she took a breath, maybe we can start over. Not as king and queen, not as husband and wife. Just as two people trying to give 3 boys the life they deserve. Nikolai took her hand, feeling the warmth, the life, the possibilities. I like that. So would I. Marcus tugged on Nikolai's coat. Are you really our dad? Nikolai looked down at his son, this quiet, watchful child with eyes too old for his face. Yes, I really am. Are you going to leave again? Never. Not if you'll let me stay. Marcus considered this, then nodded seriously. Okay, but you have to learn about dinosaurs, and help with homework, and, he glanced at his brothers, promise never to lie to us again. I promise. Damien stepped forward, and you have to teach us to be strong. Like you, I'll teach you to be better than me. Adrian, still tear-stained and shaking, reached up to touch Nikolai's face. Do you love us? Nikolai knelt down, gathering all 3 boys into his arms alongside Elena. More than my throne, more than my crown, more than my life. Then that's enough, Adrian whispered. For now. They stood there in the ruined cathedral as dawn began to break. A vampire king, a human woman, 3 impossible children, and the promise of something neither of them had dared to hope for. A future. Outside, the city woke to sunlight and coffee and the ordinary miracle of another day. And in the shadows, those who still remembered whispered about the night the vampire king gave up everything for love. Some called it weakness. Others called it strength. Nikolai called it the easiest choice he'd ever made, because in the end, the throne was just metal and stone. But family? Family was forever.